By 1952, the air war over Korea had become a contest not just of machines, but of doctrine and resolve. The United States Air Force was no longer testing jet combat, it was refining it under fire. American planners understood that air superiority would shape everything that followed on the ground. To achieve it, they targeted supply lines, infrastructure, and industrial facilities that sustained North Korean and Chinese forces. One such target lay near the Yalu River, close to the border with China. A chemical plant along that river was believed to support enemy logistics, and its destruction promised to weaken the opposing air effort. To strike it, F-84 Thunderjet fighter bombers were assigned the task. They were fast, rugged aircraft, capable of delivering heavy ordnance, but they were vulnerable. Against the sleek, high-climbing MiG-15, the Thunderjets needed protection. That protection came in the form of the F-86 Sabre. The Sabre was the symbol of American air power in the early jet age, fast, agile, and deadly in the hands of an experienced pilot. Escorting the Thunderjets that day was a flight from the 336th Fighter Squadron, led by Captain James Robinson Risner. Risner was already known among his peers as calm under pressure and uncompromising in combat. He flew a Sabre, marked with an unorthodox touch of personality. Bugs Bunny nose art, a quiet reminder that behind the oxygen mask was still a human being. As the formation moved north, the terrain below grew harsher. Endless ridgelines and steep valleys stretched toward the horizon, offering little margin for error. Ahead lay a region American pilots spoke of with a mix of dread and respect, MiG Alley. This narrow corridor along the Yalu River had become the most dangerous airspace in the war. Enemy airfields, particularly at Antung, were packed with MiG-15 seconds flown by skilled pilots, many of them veterans trained by the Soviet Union. The mission began smoothly. The American formation maintained altitude and spacing, engines steady, eyes scanning the sky. But in MiG Alley, calm was always temporary. Early warning posts around Antung detected the incoming aircraft, and alarms rippled across the airbase. Within moments, MiG pilots were sprinting to their jets, engines roaring to life as they clawed for altitude. From below, the MiGs rose aggressively, noses pointed skyward, their pilots already searching for targets above them. From above, the Americans could see the threat forming small, fast-moving shapes, climbing rapidly into the fight. The stage was set. What had started as a carefully planned escort mission was about to become something far more chaotic. And in the thin air over the Yalu, the opening moves of a brutal contest were about to unfold. The first shots of the engagement came without warning. MiG-15 seconds surged upward from Antung, their silver fuselages flashing in the sun as they closed the distance at terrifying speed. Within seconds, the sky above MiG Alley dissolved into chaos, contrails twisting, jets crossing at closing speeds that left no room for hesitation. The MiG pilots went straight for the Thunderjets. Heavier and less agile, the F-84 seconds were tempting targets. Cannon fire streaked past their wings as the enemy tried to tear holes through the bomber formation. But the Sabres were already there. Captain James Robinson Risner and his flight positioned themselves aggressively, forcing the MiGs to break off or risk a close-in dogfight they could not easily control. Risner spotted a group of 4 MiGs maneuvering to regroup. Without delay, he committed his entire 4-plane flight. The engagement tightened rapidly. Aircraft rolled inverted, dove, and climbed in violent arcs as pilots fought to gain even a momentary advantage. In jet combat, there was no time for long calculations, only instinct sharpened by training and experience. Then Risner caught one. Lining up his sights, he fired a short, disciplined burst. The rounds struck home, shattering the MiG's canopy. The enemy jet lurched away, wounded but still airborne. Instantly, the formation fractured. 3 MiGs fled in one direction, while the damaged aircraft dove hard toward the ground, its pilot gambling everything on speed and altitude. Risner made a split-second decision. He ordered 2 of his pilots to pursue the escaping group, while he and his wingman, Lieutenant Joe Logan, went after the crippled MiG. The chase dropped to terrifyingly low levels. At near supersonic speed, the MiG skimmed just above the terrain, racing through valleys and over dry riverbeds in a desperate attempt to shake its pursuers. The pursuit carried them across the Chinese border and deep into Manchuria, forbidden airspace. Every American pilot knew the rule: do not cross that line. The political consequences could be severe, even catastrophic. But in the heat of the chase, the boundary vanished beneath the roar of engines. The MiG pilot pulled a split S, rolling inverted and diving toward the earth. He barely recovered no more than 10 feet above the ground. Risner saw dust kick up from the exhaust. For a brief moment, he was stunned by the sheer audacity of the maneuver. Then instinct took over. He rolled his Sabre back into position, locking onto the MiG's tail as Logan followed close behind. The enemy tried one final trick. Throttle pulled to idle, air brakes extended in an attempt to force the Sabre to overshoot. Instead, Risner rolled over the MiG in a breathtaking move, coming down alongside it, wingtip to wingtip. Both aircraft drifted forward, engines idling, suspended in a surreal moment of calm amid violence. Later, Risner would recall seeing the enemy pilot clearly, his leather helmet, the stitching visible, his fist raised in defiance. It felt unreal, like something staged for a film. But it was happening, and the fight was not over. Ahead lay an airfield deep inside Manchuria, and there, the battle would reach its most dangerous point yet. The chase carried all 3 aircraft toward Antung Airfield, more than 30 miles inside Manchuria. By now, there was no ambiguity left. This was deep, forbidden territory. Below them lay a fully operational enemy base, bristling with parked aircraft, hangars, and anti-aircraft guns that were already tracking the intruders. The wounded MiG pilot knew this was his last chance. If he could reach the runway, he might survive. If not, the end would come in seconds. As the airfield rushed toward them, the MiG began a series of desperate, high-risk maneuvers. It streaked low over the ground, weaving between obstacles with reckless precision. Risner and Logan followed just behind, so close that there was no margin for error. Tracer fire from the airbase's anti-aircraft guns arced upward, stitching the sky with lethal intent. Every second over the field multiplied the danger. Risner was running out of ammunition. He knew he might get only one more shot. The MiG pilot made a final gamble, an act of raw instinct and survival. He flew straight between 2 hangars, their concrete walls flashing past at terrifying speed, aiming for the runway beyond. It was an audacious move, one that left almost no space for pursuit. Risner committed. For a split second, the hangars framed his vision like a narrowing tunnel. He lined up his sights and fired. The rounds struck the MiG's wing, tearing a chunk from the metal. At such low altitude, there was no time to recover. The MiG slammed into parked aircraft along the runway, exploding in a violent cascade of fire and debris. The battle was over, but the danger was not. As Risner and Logan pulled away from the airfield, reality set in. They were alone in hostile airspace, fuel gauges dangerously low. Worse still, Logan's aircraft had taken hits from ground fire during the run between the hangars. His fuel tank was punctured, and jet fuel streamed behind him. Minutes remained no more. Logan faced an impossible choice: bail out over enemy territory or attempt to reach the sea. Risner refused to abandon him. Ahead lay Chodo Island, nearly 60 miles south, home to an American rescue helicopter unit, but the route was lined with enemy flak. With time slipping away, Risner made a decision no pilot was trained to make. He urged Logan to shut down his engine to conserve fuel. Then, with extraordinary precision, he eased the nose of his F-86 into the exhaust of Logan's jet, using his own thrust to push his wingman forward. The turbulence was violent. The slightest misalignment could have destroyed both aircraft. For 15 agonizing minutes, Risner repeated the maneuver again and again, reconnecting 8 separate times. Hydraulic fluid and fuel splattered across his windscreen, blinding him. All the while, he fought to keep his own engine from choking and his aircraft from being flung out of control. Against all odds, they reached the sea. Over Chodo, Logan finally had enough altitude and distance to bail out. He radioed one last message: he would see Risner back at base. Moments later, his parachute opened. Risner, nearly out of fuel himself, attempted to shut down his engine to glide home. It failed completely. He was forced into a dead-stick landing at Kimpo. Logan, a strong swimmer, hit the water near the coast. But in a cruel twist of fate, he became entangled in his parachute lines and drowned before rescuers could reach him. The mission ended in silence. Victory had been achieved. A MiG had been destroyed, but the cost would haunt one man for the rest of his life. From a strategic standpoint, the events of the 15th of September 1952 sat at the very edge of catastrophe. The air war over Korea was never confined to the peninsula alone. It unfolded under the shadow of the Cold War, where every violation of airspace carried consequences far beyond the battlefield. When American jets crossed deep into Manchuria, they did more than chase an enemy aircraft. They brushed against the fault lines of a global conflict. Officially, the United States avoided acknowledging that Soviet pilots were flying MiG-15 seconds from Chinese bases. Unofficially, everyone involved understood the truth. A single captured pilot or a shoot-down on the wrong side of the border could have triggered a political storm neither side wanted. For American commanders, restraint was as much a weapon as firepower. Pilots were trained to disengage, to break off pursuit, and to respect invisible lines drawn by diplomats rather than generals. James Risner's decision challenged that doctrine. From a purely tactical view, his actions eliminated a dangerous enemy aircraft and demonstrated absolute mastery of air combat. But tactically brilliant decisions can still be strategically dangerous. Had Risner been shot down over Manchuria, the United States might have faced demands it could not publicly meet. In that sense, the mission exposed the fragile balance between battlefield initiative and political control in modern warfare. Yet, within the U.S. Air Force, another value carried equal weight: never abandoning a wingman. This unwritten code was not about heroics or headlines. It was about trust. In the thin margins of jet combat, pilots relied on one another not just for survival, but for sanity. Risner's attempt to save Joe Logan was not viewed as reckless bravado by many of his peers. It was seen as the purest expression of that bond. Internationally, the incident passed without public escalation. But among those who studied air combat, the episode became a quiet case study, an illustration of how individual choices could test the limits of strategy, policy, and human loyalty. The lesson was unsettling. Technology had advanced faster than doctrine. Jets could cross borders in seconds, but the consequences still unfolded slowly in political offices and grieving families. In that gap between speed and consequence, pilots like Risner were forced to make decisions alone, decisions that no briefing could fully prepare them for. James Risner returned to base alone that night. The aircraft had landed. The engines were silent. The mission logs would eventually record a confirmed MiG kill and an extraordinary act of airmanship. But none of that captured what truly remained. Lieutenant Joe Logan never walked back onto the flight line. The promise he made over the radio, "I'll see you at the base tonight," was never fulfilled. For Risner, the victory carried no celebration. He had crossed forbidden airspace, survived anti-aircraft fire, and executed a maneuver no one had ever successfully attempted. He had done everything humanly possible to save his wingman. And still, it was not enough. War, once again, had delivered its most brutal lesson: courage does not guarantee mercy. In the years that followed, Risner's career would rise. He was promoted, respected, and trusted with greater responsibility. During the Chinh Tran Vietnam, he would lead the very first strike of Operation Rolling Thunder, shaping another chapter of American air power. Later, shot down and captured, he would endure more than 7 years as a prisoner of war, becoming a symbol of resilience, leadership, and quiet defiance under unimaginable pressure. Yet among all his achievements, it is that day in 1952 that lingers most powerfully. Not because of the MiG that fell in flames on a Manchurian runway, not because of the daring chase through enemy skies, but because of a choice made when turning back would have been easier and safer. Risner's story reminds us that military history is not written only by strategies and outcomes, but by moments where individuals confront impossible decisions. In those moments, the line between heroism and heartbreak disappears. What remains is intent, loyalty, and the weight of consequence. The contrails over MiG Alley faded long ago. The airfields have changed, but the questions raised by that battle still endure. When everything is at stake, career, life, even peace itself, how far should one go for a comrade? If this story made you reflect on the human cost behind historic victories, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value deep, thoughtful explorations of military history and the lessons it leaves behind, consider subscribing so we can continue examining the moments that shaped our world. The battle may be over, but history is still asking its questions.